I have made over 17 artworks in Artstation for my portfolio, and most of them have reached between 1.5k views to 3000 views. Today I will show you how I make my renders using Marmoset Selftauhgt 4 by breaking my process in 5 stages. Now let's get started. Hey guys, so now we are inside Marmoset Selftauhgt 4. Everything I'm going to explain mostly works for Marmoset Selftauhgt 3, but there's some specific details that comes to the render settings and using a ray tracing that is not gonna be available for that version. So I would suggest you to update at least to Marmoset 4 or 5 for this tutorial. Now, the first step is creating the material and importing the textures. How do we create a material for Marmoset so that we can apply to a mesh, and how do we import the textures? So I have a material already here, but let's start one from scratch. So I can go to any of these ones, but I'm gonna go to this one and I can create a new material. Now if you go here, you can have an already made material with a lot of things that are kind of like preset, but we are not gonna be using these ones. In case you want to use it, I think it's gonna be alright. Yes, they're basically the same, the displacement and the new material, but let's go from scratch. So I'm gonna name this new material as test. And I'm gonna go over everything. So first I wanna have displacement. So I'm gonna set this to height. Yes, and height in Marmoset tends to be quite strong, so I'm gonna give it a value of 0.01 for the moment. There we go. Now my normal map seems alright, my albedo seems alright because I can use both of them, but now let's go to reflection and change it to so microsurface, and make sure that this is into roughness as it is instead of glossiness. We need to be referencing the red channel, of course. And here we have our metalness, which we are not going to be using, so in this case it should be 0. And we're going to go here to occlusion and set this to occlusion as well. Now we have all our inputs for the material. So what do we do now? We're gonna import our textures. How are we going to do this? So what you are going to do is you're gonna open your Windows Explorer and look for your textures in your file, and you're gonna start to import them. I'm gonna do it in a specific way because I know my computer is gonna crash, but you don't have to do it in the same way. So I'm gonna pull my normal here, just drop it here, yes, and give it time to load because it's gonna take some time. And of course it's not gonna show here because it's not applied yet. Once I have my normal, I'm just gonna go for my base color. Yes, here again it takes some time, don't worry. Then height, this is gonna be the displacement, roughness, and finally ambient occlusion, which I kind of missed the roughness. That's because it's just taking too much from my memory. So now I have my maps and I have my material here. You can see it right here, but there's some things missing and I can see it from the preview. So I'm gonna drop my material here into my sphere and it's gonna load. So as you can see, my material is there, it's ready and working. But there's some things that are not working well. First, it's not showing all of my material, so I'm gonna change this styling to 2. And that should start showing everything of my material, yeah? Now I can offset this a little bit. I wanna offset this a little bit, see what it does. Just gonna kind of move the other way around, actually, to the place I want it to. So let's do 0.02. I want to have this one kind of like in the middle. Yeah, I want to have it in the middle of my material. You have to make sure that this shows, like this render shows everything you have on your material. Other thing I'm realizing, my displacement is not working really well, and we are going to talk about that in really soon. But first I'm going to change my height scale to 0.02. This is going to allow me to have more height, and this is going to allow also to better shadows, as you can see down here. So how do we work with displacement is something that comes in Marmoset Selftauhgt 4 and different to Marmoset Selftauhgt 3 comes specifically with the mesh. That's gonna be the next step. But first, let's talk about the normal and the albedo. So in here you can see I have my flip Y. If I touch it, you're gonna see that these are gonna have some weird normal. So this is depending on the format you're using on your normal map. If you're using DirectX, you are most probably gonna need to flip your Y, that is your green channel. If you're using OpenGL for your normal map, you're gonna have to leave it just as it is because this is the format that Marmoset takes it. Now, if you see that your base color looks a little bit kind of like whiten up, that means that you have it in linear RGB, and you have it to need to have your base color in RGSB. Yeah, so make sure about those two things so you don't have any problem. Now for the metallic, in this case we're not using anything, so we're gonna have it to 0. Step number 2 is importing the mesh and set it up the displacement for our material. So the same way we imported the textures here to my right, we're gonna do exactly the same for the mesh. We're just gonna drag it from our Windows Explorer into our 3D viewport, and what we're gonna do, yes, and we need to be sure, is that our mesh has exactly a really high level of subdivision. Different to Marmoset 2.3, we need a lot of subdivisions here for this to work. So what happens is when you import this, you're gonna see this here. You're gonna see the name of the mesh, yes, and you're gonna see a plus icon. Click on that icon, go to the name of your actual mesh with this kind of blue cube, and go to the subdivision part. Set this to PN triangles and click on subdivide. Then increase the subdivision levels till you feel comfortable with the amount. Now be really careful because this is really strong and can kill your computer. Now for the first step, you're gonna set your lighting, and for this I have another camera that is my main camera that is gonna help me move around. Yeah, so now right now if I go here to main shot camera, this should be here. I should be able to see everything I'm doing. Yes, let me kind of like see where I am right now. Where is this virtual sphere? Oh, here in this group. So I have these lights here. Great. Perfect. So I have different lights here, yeah? And most of these lights, yes, are directional lights. You can create this light by clicking on this icon, yes, this is gonna be new light, and you can change the type to directional light. Now that you have that, you're gonna press this one, and you're gonna be able to move this light as long as you want, yes? So you wanna position this in 3 different spaces, yes? So let's go all over them by looking them from our main shot camera. So the first one is top right. You're seeing that this light is basically creating a cone, yes? For this light, that is my light 1, I'm using a brightness of 7 with a diameter of 41.86 centimeters with a spot angle of 76.35. Now the spot sharpness is actually quite important as well, because you don't want it to be like so strong on it. Yeah, so if I go here to light and lower the spot sharpness and then increase it, you're gonna see that there's gonna be some more like kind of sharp shadows on it, and you want to keep it not that strong and not that low as well. Now for your next 3 lights, you wanna feel the rim of this, yeah? So if I turn this one down, you're gonna see you have one light there, another one beneath, yes, that in fact, you know what, I'm gonna increase the intensity here, 6.5, so you can see it's coming from here. And finally another light, that this one, it's coming from the back if I'm not mistaken, so I'm gonna just increase this to 8. Oh, sorry, the third light is coming from below, yes, this second light is coming from the top left, yeah, so you can see these are our 2 lights, and then we have the light that comes from the center, and finally the one that comes at the right. So you can change this. Now the reason we have these lights in this way is because we like having this kind of ring light in here, and we can briefly change this in different ways, and just by changing the intensity of these lights. As you can see here, I'm lowering the value and I still have those ring lights, but I have kind of like really intense shadow, which I don't like a lot, to be honest, at this point, but I'm just gonna leave it just to show you a little bit more of how this does. Once we have our lights positioned in this place, we're gonna go to the first step, the camera settings. So for the camera settings, I'm using this camera that is called main shot. You can change the name at any point and change from camera, going here, camera, and going to any of these. Also, you can change the quality of your screen by going from full quality to draft quality like this. Yes, just to make your computer a little bit not that heavy. Now that we are here in our main shot, let's see our parameters. So most of my parameters are basically in here. So first, you want to have this line. This line is showing you what you are actually seeing, and it's the same frame. Yes, the same frame is going to allow you to actually see everything. Yes, I'm having a field of view 45, yes, with 28.97 millimeters. Yes, and I have my mode on perspective. That's actually quite important. Now, I'm not using any kind of focus. Despite this is kind of set up to actually be working, I'm not using it at all. Yes, you can see it here. So you can turn that off for this kind of shot. For the next one, on flare and motion blur, I'm not using any of this, mainly because when I'm gonna do the post-processing for my renders, then it kind of like really kills what I'm trying to do. So motion blur, it's not something I really like adding to my videos or renders for material, yeah. So I'm gonna turn it off, and I'm gonna go to the post effects because this is where things get interesting. So I'm using a tone mapping of ACs with an exposure in 2.5. Then I'm using a 0.1 clarity and a contrast in 1.01. A contrast center is 0.5 and a saturation of 1. Now the really important part that you can see here is the curve. So what I'm doing, I'm leveling some parts on the right side of my curve to the top side and lowering some left side of my curves into the lower part. This is going to allow me for higher contrast in my material. For some reason I think that when I change this, yeah, there we go. So I think that for the moment I would suggest you to set the depth of field to ray tracing and set a distance of 86/7, but this distance is gonna really depend on where your camera is, yes? Now that you have your colors, you need to go to the next steps. So you can sharpen this a little bit. I am sharpening this by 1, but you can lower this. You can see the high difference it makes. Yeah, and following up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna check some of these parameters down here. So you have the bloom. I'm not really used to using the bloom because it generates some kind of like area here that you're not gonna be able to remove later with a mask, and in this case it's not my kind of thing to do when rendering these materials. I mean, it looks really nice, but it's not my style as well. Now the vignette, it's really useful, but not for what we are doing right now. Yes, these kind of shots are not the ones we're gonna be using the vignette, but that will be showing you later. So the grain, it's something that you can add to your material, and it's gonna add some little noise in the background, which is actually not that bad. But to be honest, if you're already working with realistic materials and you want to be doing a lot of details, this could really kill your material. And you can see here to my left how this grain it's looking. Yeah, look at this. I mean, it does add another effect, but again, you need to be really artistic with this if you want to use it. Now that you have your camera settings, let's talk about your render settings, because this is where the magic happens. So if you are using Marmoset toolbar as me, you're gonna have these settings in your render scene. You're gonna use ray tracing with caustics in 5. You're gonna have 6 bouncings and 6 transmissions. In your viewport, you're gonna use 256 samples. Now you can lower this down because the idea of this is not to kill your computer and be able to work really fine and make some renders to see how it looks. So you're gonna use, I'm using a denoise of using my CPU at high quality. Then I'm keeping my shadows at high quality with 0.8 of cascade distance using cascades. Same time I'm using ray tracing ambient occlusions, and in here are the parts that we want to have. Yes, this is really important because this is how you make the render and the resolution you want. So you're going to be taking a resolution of 3840 by 2160 and you're going to export it in PNG. And most importantly, you're going to be using 800 samples. That's going to allow you, yes, to have maximum quality. Now there's some issue here. Usually in Marmoset, you could change this in your camera, but right now here, you just can do it here. So I can change this and it's going to change like how my camera looks really fast. See, now this is thanks to the main setting we set in our main shot, that is basically the save frame. If I remove the save frame, you're gonna see that I don't see it, but now I do. So if I go back to my renders camera and do Ctrl+C, this is something again really important. When you do Ctrl+C in Marmoset toolbar in this version and you're using ray tracing, it's just for every single detail you change, it's gonna recalculate all your main settings and lighting. Yes, it's kind of important because it may kind of crash your software as well. So going on to my renders. Now that you have here in your output into the image section, you have the resolution, you have your format and samples, it's time to press render. But before you do that, be sure to set the direction of or location of your render and also choose your camera. If you don't see your camera here, let me show you how you do it. First, I'm going to remove the camera I want to do. In fact, I'm going to remove all of them. I can add them later, no problem at all. And what I'm going to add a new camera and go to my main shot camera. Yes, now I have it here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to render this image right now. Now, the image you see right now on your screen is the result of the render we just made. Of course, there's some post-processing effects that if you want, I can show you in another chapter, but now I want to show you some extra content on Marmoset. Right now, what you're seeing on Marmoset is a new way, or let's say a new way, but my own signature on how I render materials. So for this, let me lower a little bit my intensity here to 2 to show you what I actually try to achieve here. Yes, so in this kind of renders, I always try to achieve some directionality and also some really interesting. Now I have different cameras here, for example the main shot 2 as well, that has different light settings already prepared, where I would actually kind of like look into making interesting shots here while I try to keep everything on place. Now some of these look kind of off, and the reason for that is because the main shot 2 camera is using as well a focus. If I remove it, it's just gonna look sharp again. Yes, also if I go down, I have a strength on my sharpest that I don't need so far. So I'm gonna remove it a little bit. Yeah, and what's gonna happen now is I wanna find another camera I have around here. Yes, not this one. This camera, yes, to show you a little bit more about how this works in Substance Designer. Now let me show you something really important. When we want to make some renders, it's really important that we have our own way and originality. Right now the texture is really sharp in color. That's a texture problem, that's not my the actual render problem. But let me do some changes here. For example, in my height, to show you something, I'm gonna change my height to 0 so you can see the difference between one and each other. See that right now the light is just going through, that's a ray tracing. So if I change this again to having at least a 1 in height, what's gonna happen is it's gonna generate some, oh my god, I just went too far maybe. It's gonna generate some shadows that are really important for our material. You know, the more shadows we have, the more realistic our material is looking. So right now I'm having my skylight, which is actually giving us some fill light, and I choose a specific HDR. That's something really important that I forgot to mention before, but you can see how it's actually affecting here. And the way I have set up my light, yes, it's gonna allow me to basically create more detail into what I'm trying to do, or even less, depending on how I use it. So I need to learn how to use it in a really smart way. Now with this kind of shot, there's two things I can do that really help me improve my type of render. One of them is my fill light, just for this kind of shadows, but the others are all in my camera settings. So if I come here to my camera settings, now I do have my ray tracing depth of field activated, and if I turn this wheel to the bottom of it, you're gonna see where my side is being focused. Yes, if I go this and increase the number, you're gonna see that now you're gonna see super high details in these things. Yes, but you're not gonna be really watching what's going on here. The reason for that, it's simple how our brain works. So if I have all of this detail being shown right now and everything being so sharp, your brain is gonna start to kind of like negate all of this information, because there's too much information and it's being quite repetitive. So if we kind of shut down or quiet down a little bit of that noise, what starts to happen is that this starts to look a little more nice, more good, because we are able to see more without having many other informations being actually on top of us. So you can change your point of detail just by moving the focus distance. As you can see, it's quite soft, so be really careful with it. Yeah, and now the other thing we're going to do is we're gonna use some distortion. Yes, see this kind of distortion. Sometimes it's really good to have this kind of eye fish in your renders, because it adds a little bit of camera realism. And finally, what we were talking about before, the vignette. The vignette adds some kind of like circle around where it kind of darkens certain top areas. Yeah, and this is something I'm doing with most of my renders. Yes, and it actually helps a lot, but especially to this kind of shots. These kind of shots are the ones that really take me on my renders to another level, because it's showing a lot of artistic direction in general. And again, there's many ways of balancing this, so you have kind of like a really good composition to what you're doing. In some cases, and for these kinds of shots in particular, what I used to do is I have two lights that are placed exactly in the same place, but there's one light with more intensity, like this one that has 7.5 and this one that has 7.2. But what I do is I increase a little bit the spot angle just to create a little bit more of soft shadows, just like you're seeing there. And now from here I can create a new render. Yes, a new render that is going to be more useful to what I am trying to do. Now let me do a small editing to this so I can show you better how it looks. So now by changing some parameters and putting my material in a specific way, I managed to create an interesting shot where I have my point light, my directional light, sorry, starting from this top and guiding the eye all throughout this way till the bottom. Now I can also use some depth of field here. Yes, as you can see, I'm not using it. Let's try using it to try to make this even better. I can even make effects with this where I kind of go from something really blurred to something really simple. But look at this, how this starts to look now. I can go and keep trying and trying and trying, and it's gonna make a different render. I'm covering these areas which I don't want you to see, but I'm trying to show you these areas which I really like how it's looking. Yes, so these are different ways, and I can even tilt a little my camera to make it fit a little bit better into the composition. Yes, so now I have a really interesting shot that is gonna be able to make my render and artwork get to the top trending of Artstation. Now that you know how to render your material at max quality, let me help you achieve better results in Substance Designer. I have created a Discord community for everyone who is interested in creating materials, where professionals are helping students learn the basics to become the future material artists of the industry. You can join us by going to the description of this video and clicking on the link for our Discord server. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next chapter.